Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining either live or during this recording. My name is Erin Zimmerman, and I am the marketing manager here at Global Ties Kansas City. And before we get started, before we get into things, I want to make sure that you all know that you can leave your comments and your questions in the chat, and we will be happy to answer and engage with you throughout this discussion. So I have with me today Cindy. Cindy, I would love for you to introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. So my name is Cindy Brewer. I've been on the Global Ties board actually for since 2018. And I'm a German-born dual citizen of both Germany and the US. I came to Kansas City for the very first time in 2013 for an internship, and I kind of got stuck. So I kept on coming back, and in 2015, I moved there permanently. But for most of my childhood, I grew up in Germany, and I started my early career right out of high school, actually in a German manufacturing business in the Stuttgart area, which is where I was born and raised. And then I kind of continued my post-college career in Kansas City. So I consider Stuttgart and Kansas City both to be my hometowns. I'm currently in Florida, Palatka, Florida. I'm working for Kiewit Construction on a power plant job.
Wow, you've been all over the place. I'd love to know more. And this is part of our Diverse KC series. Wow. And for Global Spokes. And I was so excited that Courtney said, hey, we've got Cindy, and this is actually the first time that we're meeting. Cindy's on the board. I'm so excited to be able to meet more people on the board as I'm newer to the organization. But we have been really impatiently waiting for Germany to happen so that we could have you on. So we appreciate your time for joining us. And I'd love to know more about your hometown. Could you tell me a bit about your experience there and what you liked, what you disliked maybe about your first hometown before Kansas City?
Absolutely, that would be my pleasure. So Stuttgart is in the southwest of Germany. Most people, when they hear Stuttgart, if they know it, they will know it for Mercedes, Porsche. So it's a big automotive capital of Germany. It's funny that you said impatiently waiting for Germany, because I think that's one of the qualities of the people of that area in Germany is, I don't know if impatience is the right word. I'm certainly very impatient, but it's just like a very ingenuity and manufacturing driven place, and very high pride and quality. And that's kind of how the whole culture in that area, I think Germany in general, but in that the south of Germany, which we call Swabia, it's well known for to just be very kind of to the point and strict. So that's, one of the things that it's kind of a love-hate relationship, because it's taught me a lot of things in life, and I certainly consider it one of my personal cultural traits, and also one of my qualities, to be very driven and on point and focused on accuracy and quality. But it can also sometimes take out the sweetness of things if you're too focused and too much to the point, which, maybe jumping ahead a little bit, when I started, living in Kansas City, and just that warmth of the Midwestern hospitality is really kind of a stark contrast to my hometown. Very similar qualities, and in both cities, but that's something that I always notice when I go back to visit, is that that extreme friendliness that you experience in Kansas City is not so much present in Stuttgart. And I've noticed, and I'm very grateful that I was able to take on that cultural trait of Kansas City, is like that friendliness and over hospitality in a way, which also worked out and played in really well with me being with Global Ties and being able to host a bunch of people. And I think that's one of the, you know, amazing things, just one of the amazing things that Kansas City Global Ties KC does in a normal year, and why it resonates so much with me.
And say, what even is normal anymore? I don't remember. I don't remember the time before. But you're talking a little bit about Kansas City as well. And so I was curious, you said you got an internship here. First of all, how did you get that in Kansas? Like, what brought you, how was that trajectory? Like, how did it become Kansas City? And then did you know anything about Kansas City before you came here? Like, what were your thoughts before living here?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So a lot of people ask me that, you know, out of all the places in the US, how did you land smack dab in the middle? So actually I have some family back in the Stuttgart area who work for a manufacturing company, of course, and their US headquarters happens to be in Kansas City. They're in Lenexa. And when I was in college, I went for international business for my undergrads. We had a requirement to do an internship abroad in a non-German speaking country. A little bit of, I guess, extra background is with my US German citizenship, I can basically move freely between both countries. So it just seemed like an easy solution for me to come to the US to intern here. And I do have a lot of family in the US, and I've always like wanted to try it out as a home for me as an adult. So when that opportunity came along, you know, to be honest, I wasn't super excited about Kansas City to start off with because I didn't know a lot about it. But I took it, and I'm really, really happy that I did, because now moving around the country, working for Kiewit, it's amazing how often I miss it, how often I just miss Kansas City. It's an amazing place. You have everything that you could possibly need in a city and more. I won't complain about the ocean over here, I will say that. But just the vibe of the city is so incredible. And I guess a fun fact, when I was in kindergarten, first grade, my dad did experiment with moving our family to the US for a couple of years. And I did go to first grade in Newton, Kansas, which is over by Wichita. And I have some pictures of myself and my family in front of the Chiefs Stadium, like as a 6 or 7-year-old. So it was just funny to come back as a young adult and be like, hey, I think I've been here before.
I love that. I love making those kinds of connections. And you're right, we don't have an ocean. I think that's the one thing or mountains, but we're closer to mountains than ocean. I was born here. I was partially raised back and forth between here and California. It took me leaving for college, and by here I mean Kansas City. Wow, Erin. It took me leaving for college to like really start to miss it here. And now I appreciate it so much. And I love traveling, but I really, really love coming home. So I feel you there. But yeah, the ocean. Oh, I do wish we had like an ocean just right there. And then I would be in heaven, I feel. So I'm curious, what do you know of the German diaspora in Kansas City? Are there many Germans here? Yeah, that's really where I'm at. And I know that there are a handful of organizations because I've been in contact with some of them, but do you have any affiliation with any of the organizations as well?
I know of most of them, I would say. I didn't ever get heavily involved with them because I think as a fairly new, I wouldn't say immigrant, but just someone who chose to move away from her home country, I was still able to go back once or twice a year. I didn't miss it as much. I certainly miss it. It'll always be my first home. But I didn't ever get really deeply involved with any of the German clubs in Kansas City. I know there are a handful. I know especially also if you go further towards St. Louis, like Herman, Missouri has a huge German diaspora. And I think for me, especially the first couple of years working in Kansas City, I was working for a German company. So both of my bosses were German. I spoke German on a daily basis with coworkers back in the main office in Germany. And so especially those first couple of years, for me, I didn't really miss much. We would do regular like lunches at Casey Beer. If you know about that, they have amazing German, like traditionally German brewed beer and pretzels and all that. German Heart Desires, really great place. And there's an Austrian restaurant by the, gosh, I've been away for too long, the Grunauer.
Grunauer, yes. I was gonna say I love Grunauer.
Yes. So there's a fair. So there's definitely some, tidbits here and there where you can always like load up on your German if you need to. Yeah. But I've been, whenever I used to go to the Cultural Enrichment Festival, I would always go by the Germans and say hi. And, that's, I think, kind of leading back to what I said originally is like Germans aren't known to be like the most warm and welcoming people. It doesn't mean that we're not loving and caring. It's just like not really built into our personality trait that much. So, I feel like when other cultures like run into each other, they're like, oh, yeah, and they like immediately embrace each other. Maybe not so much for Germans.
Like I said, I forget what it was like before. I'm curious how you got connected with Global Ties KC, like, and now you're on the board. Like, how did that all happen?
Okay, let me see. So I was, I guess after a while of being in Kansas City, I was craving that internationalism. As I said, I studied international business. I've traveled all over the world. And if you don't actively seek that within Kansas City, if your, I guess, natural environment doesn't allow for that international community through college or just your family or whichever, you kind of have to go seek it out. And then, but just like door opens in this whole huge world of international community presented itself. But yeah, I think I was just kind of looking to fill that need, that personal need of international connections. I want to say just like a simple Google search and stumbled upon Global Ties. I was browsing around a website and saw that they had open board positions. So I was like, well, I'm not, I thought I'm way too young and inexperienced to be on a board of some sorts. But I was like, you know what, I'll just see if they have volunteering opportunities. Sounds like such a cool organization. So I reached out to Courtney, who put me in touch with, I think Paul Wido was the president at that point. He reached out to me. We had an amazing conversation. He thought that I'm not too young to be a board member. And then I landed on the board in early 2018. I've been on there since. I've had a couple of different functions. Right now I'm, supporting remotely, but so is everyone else. And it fills me with so much joy, whether it's a board meeting or whether it's another event, like even this, just to get involved. It always like fills my tank of it fills my heart, and it just fills my need for international interaction. And I've hosted a couple of youth and at my house back in Kansas City for overnight stays, and then I've had plenty of guests over for dinner and been to different events that we've hosted with different delegations, and it's just always so amazing to just be a part of this incredible organization.
I love all of that. I did not come onto the team until after the pandemic started. And so I don't know it as an in-person organization. And I hear people talk about these dinners and hosting folks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do that so badly. And as you've transitioned into this virtual world, like many of us have, how do you feel Global Ties has done in that virtual world? And do you see it as not, like, being virtual is not able to connect as well as we could have before the pandemic? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's funny that you ask that. We always talk about that, you know, in general, the performance of Global Ties on our board meetings. And I am so baffled by how amazing you guys are doing, by how amazing the organization has adapted to this change. If you think about going from completely in-person programming, I mean, I don't think we ever really seriously had a virtual event, maybe like here and there, you know, for planning purposes. But I think Global Ties was able to maintain that person-to-person connection with all of the things that we are doing now. You know, like this, featuring a different country each week, and some of the other things that have been happening, like with El Salvador, and just the programs have all shifted. Luckily, all the organizations that are involved and Department of State have been willing to give it a shot to do everything online. And I just think Global Ties is at the forefront of it, really, both in Kansas City and just overall in the US. You know, Global Ties US, and then you guys and Courtney and your team are just really taking it up a notch. And I haven't been able to participate in as many live streams as I would like to, but yeah, I think that, to answer your question, I think Global Ties has adapted incredibly well to this pandemic.
I feel so as well, even though I came on in the middle of that adaptation. But I'm looking forward to when we can all be in person, because not that I feel like this is great. And I don't know. I love entertaining people, and I love the hospitality piece of it. I think we're doing really well making things accessible for now, and we'll have these options going forward, because it's no longer a space that we are less versed in. So it's really exciting. I feel like making things accessible going forward, in addition to in person, is just super important. And I feel
Absolutely.
really excited to be a part of this organization as we're doing that. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about when you first came here, and I know that you had lived in America for a couple of years when you were younger, but are there any stereotypes that you've had to overcome, whether it's, you know, just in general, but also German stereotypes or anything like that, like being from a different country, being born in a different country, that you have had to overcome here, or anything else? Maybe it's, did you find like a community pretty quickly? How was that when if you can remember that far back? I'm just kidding. If you can give us just some insight into that.
Right. All right. So a couple of thoughts on that. I think there were definitely some stereotypes. Again, first working for a German company, most coworkers there were pretty used to, you know, working around Germans. So all their stereotypes had already either dissolved or been confirmed. But as I started venturing out, I was like so isolated in a way. When I first came, I worked for this company in Alexa. I lived in the apartment that was in the company. I was given a car and a phone, and basically, you know, I was like 23 at the time. So I was, you know, I wasn't that young anymore. So, but it was really shocking to me. It was like the first time that I had to build connections completely on my own. I mean, I had the company I worked for, I had that community there, but I feel like we kind of underestimate that when we're used to going, to school somewhere, whether it's high school or college. You usually automatically latch on to your fellow students or international club or whatever clubs it is that you're involved in. When you come somewhere as a quote unquote adult, um, that's not really provided anymore, right? So you kind of have to put in a lot of extra effort to build that community. Um, and I was lucky that through the work I was doing, I was able to connect with various colleges. I was working with Johnson County Community College, Metropolitan College, and I was doing a little bit of HR and recruiting at that time. So I got involved with a lot of different organizations and educational institutions through that. Um, I'm pretty like active person, so I started going to gym and meeting people there. But one of the hardest things for me to find in Kansas City was reliable friends. And I think that's kind of also goes back to what I was saying originally about that, that drivenness of Germans. When we're committed to a friendship, we're really committed to it. And we'll always, when we say we're going to be somewhere, we're going to be somewhere. And that was a little bit a hard pill for me to swallow at first. That I don't really know exactly how to call it, but this, yeah, we should hang out sometime. And I was like, okay, but when? Can I put it on my calendar? What time? When are you free? And, it took me a while to understand people that grew up in Kansas City, they have that community already. They already have their groups from their hometown and from college, from work. And so it's kind of hard to come in and fit in somewhere, especially when you grew up on a different culture and you don't really know exactly how to fit in. So I guess, to long story short, I was eventually able to gather my community, my tribe here and there. I think it took me a while to calibrate myself and just understand the difference in between cultures, when it comes to friendship and community. And I think honestly, global ties played a huge role in that for me, because not only was I able to have that international community through the board, I was also able to host a ton of people from all over the world, and kind of understanding that community in a traditional sense, and I guess friendships in a traditional sense just look very different nowadays in a global setting. And with some of the people I've hosted, I'm still Facebook friends, and we still follow each other and comment on each other's things. I wouldn't say it's, a daily WhatsApp back and forth, but it's like we're definitely still in each other's lives and are excited for each other. And I think that's what that, I'm also very excited for the in-person programming to hopefully return, because it's one of the things that a lot of the delegations say is, this is the first time we've been inside of someone's house versus a conference room or a boardroom or, institution, whatever. It's like their only insight they get into families and real people, in a sense. It's often also when they say it's the only time they've seen children on their whole trip, and a lot of them have children back home. So they're excited about that. So I don't know if I really answered your question.
No, I think so, because you went over how relationships were in the beginning and how they were, non-existent. But I'm glad that you overcame that. I feel like, to your point about people being, I don't know, maybe flighty or something like that, where it's like, yeah, sure, let's hang out sometime. I feel like that may also have a little bit to do with how we are raised to be nice. So you've got the nice, but the other side of it is like, super excited in the moment and then like not as much as you go along, or over committing or things like that, and
Yes.
it's less focused more so than it is just like saying yes to too many different things.
I like that. I never thought about it that way. That gives me kind of
It's definitely, don't take it personally, I'll tell you that.
oh yeah,
We
it's been
all
so many
experience
years.
it.
Yeah.
But with that, and I love that you brought up the loyalty and the focusing on friendships and stuff like that, but is there anything else that you feel that either Americans misunderstand about Germans, or that we should know about your culture in just like, you know, this brief amount of time that we're able to talk, your
Mhm.
culture and the people there, or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had some opportunities working here for Kiewit to do some, I don't know, call it like cultural training or something like that whenever we have pursued ventures with German clients or prospects. And it's been funny because I think that a lot of stereotypes are stereotypes because they're true. And I think that some of the stereotypes about Germans just being a little bit strong-hearted, I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of like stark and strict and not as like fluffy and out there as other cultures. I think that's definitely true. But I don't think that it's often taken in a sense, especially from really warm-hearted people from the Midwest, as being rude. And I don't think that it's intended that way. And that's probably one of my biggest, things that I always want to tell and share. And I think for everyone involved in the international community, we understand that cultures just communicate differently, right? Whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication. Just because someone's very direct and to the point doesn't mean that they don't appreciate you and that they're not interested in what you're saying. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I could say is just, understand it with like that cultural lens of this is just how we communicate. And we don't always want to make it fluffy and flowery because we're a very efficient folk, I guess. That's one of, I guess that's one of the biggest misconceptions I often run into. And again, like a lot of the other things that people say, like whenever Germans talk German, it sounds like you're yelling at someone. Yeah, I can't argue with that. That's definitely true. It's just like a very, very harsh language. But again, like we're not actually yelling at you. It's just the way our language sounds.
Right. Well, and I feel like so many people look at it as, well, we're, if you're looking at it from the nice culture perspective or whatever, it's like black and white. I feel like people are looking at it like, oh, well, we're nice. So because they are more efficient in their language, or because they sound harsh, that's negative, because it's different from what we do. And we think ours is positive and theirs is negative. And that's not true at all. You can be short and to the point and still be kind, or still have good intent. It's just like you said, it's communicating differently. It's different cultures, and I love that, because those are definitely things that I've heard about German culture, is that or that I've interacted with, is that they're very to the point. They sound like they're yelling at me, but personally, I've never taken that as I need to stop talking to German
Good.
people kind of thing. So with that, I know that you talked a little bit about the food around Kansas City, which I love all of the places you mentioned, but I was curious, if people in Kansas City want to have a really great German experience, what would be your number one suggestion? And then if people in Kansas City want to go to Germany, what is like one thing that you would suggest that they do, or a place they should go?
All right. So yeah, a couple of the places I mentioned earlier, I have to advocate for KC beer. not just because I know the owners, but just because it's a really, really great time.
It's a good owner to know.
Yeah, I know, right? The beer garden, I think should be open because it's outside and enough space to social distance. They really, kind of not single-handedly, they partnered to throw the Oktoberfest at Crown Center last year. I've been the last 2 years, and it's pretty close to, what you would think of when you think about Oktoberfest. Um, they have very, very good beer that's distributed in pretty much any bar and any liquor store throughout Kansas City. From a really like culinary perspective, I think Grunauer is really good, even though it's Austrian, but Austria is just south of Bavaria, so Bavarian and Austrian culture are very similar. Probably any Austrians listening to this are going to disagree, but from a culinary standpoint, it's very similar. So Grunauer's is an excellent place to try. Their Kässpätzle or cheese spätzle, which is like a pasta type with just trenched in cheese, and usually topped with some like glazed onions. It's really good. I've been to a fair once or twice. There's a type of asparagus that we typically eat in the spring. It's white asparagus versus green asparagus. And they typically carry that around like April, May timeframe. It comes with like a hollandaise sauce. It's really good. And then I've also been to Herman and done like a wine tasting. There's just a lot of German culture there. It's just if someone's really craving some more German culture, it's a nice little trip, especially now in the fall. And then for anyone who's planning a trip to Germany, once all this craziness is eventually over, it really depends. I think there's a lot of people just, hop on their Grand Euro tour and skip over a lot of beautiful places in Germany. But I would say that a lot of people get it right, the places that they do hit. They often go to Oktoberfest in Munich. I want to say that Stuttgart has an amazing Oktoberfest too, and it takes place, Oktoberfest is based around a harvest season, which a lot of people I think don't realize. They think it's just a huge party, which it is, but it's based around a harvest season. So there's usually one in the spring and one in the fall. And there's one in Stuttgart. It's called the Cannstatter Vasen, and it's a really great version of an October or Spring Fest as well. Once all of that is back up and going, I would definitely recommend that. Stuttgart as a city is really interesting and has a lot of great history, especially for automotive nerds. The Mercedes and the Porsche Museum are a really nice time just to kind of get a little bit more background on the history on those two nice cars. And other than that, a lot of people just like looking at the castles in the south. And it's funny because I never understood this fascination about castles until I moved away for long enough and then went back a couple of years ago for my brother's wedding. So we had a lot of Americans visiting, and we did like we visited a castle. I was like, wow, I know I've been to castles as a child, and I fully appreciated it. So, sometimes it takes that being away to fully appreciate it. And then just I've talked a lot about the South because that's the region that I'm from. The mountains there are amazing. But then also there's a lot of great cities in the north. Hamburg is a really fun city with a cool like coastal marine vibe. And then of course Berlin. I have family in Berlin, and just so much amazing history and culture. But I would say it's more like a New York City or Miami of Germany, because there's just so much, it's such a huge melting pot. So it really depends. There's probably something for everyone's taste in a very small country.
I love it. And any recommendations specifically for like a restaurant or something?
Hmm. Wow, that's
You're like, there's
caught me
too
off
many.
guard. There's
But like,
too
do you
many.
have like a
Yeah.
favorite in Germany or no?
Um, the funny thing is that, and that's actually a good point that I could probably mention. I struggle with chain restaurants a lot in the US. I always try to find like those little gems, and Kansas City is an amazing city to do that, right? But in a lot of other cities in the US, I'm always like, no, I don't want to go to X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to mention any
I
names
don't need
again, but
McDonald's again.
yeah,
I'm doing it. I'm gonna say
yeah,
it.
yeah. I was going like for Chili's and Olive Garden, that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No more
But
Applebee's.
yeah, but so yeah, there's just I would say the best thing you can do, the best food you can get, whichever small town you're in, just walk to the center of it's usually like most cities are or little towns are like really old style. So if you like walk to the center of the town, there's usually a restaurant or two there, and just ask for their specialty. They have, it's a pretty heavy cuisine. It has like a lot of pork. It has like schnitzel, which is like fried pork. It has a lot of dark sauces and dumplings. So it's pretty heavy, but it's delicious. So that would be my recommendation. I could, name off things in my little town, but no one would be able to even Google them probably. But that's my recommendation. And then something to be aware of, I guess, which I always know, but I kind of even forget when I go back to visit, and friends, Americans who have gone to Germany to visit have told me, is the opening times. We're not really a 24/7 culture. We're not quite like, we don't take siestas or such like in Spain, but Sundays, it's hard to find any supermarket that's open. A lot of restaurants are typically open on Sundays, but only until a certain time. If you're somewhere like locked in a small town, just be cautiously aware of that you may have to plan ahead for your meal, because there's just like some sort of, I guess, sacredness about off times and closing times. And if you're stuck in a holiday weekend, geez, you won't be able to get to any supermarket in the next 5 days. Again, it's not quite as extreme as like I know in like places in Spain and Italy, like they get very, very strict about shutting things down for weeks and weeks on end. It's not quite that extreme, but just something to be aware of.
Well, that's good to know. It's something that, like, when I've traveled before, I haven't thought too much about, like, even blocks of time where during each day where things are closed.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's one of those things where part of me is like, I'm spoiled, but also not. And having so much available to me all of the time, I think it also has contributed to my personal, like, lack of boundaries, which I'm constantly working on. So I love it. I love it so much. Um, yeah, with that, is there anything else that you'd like to share or for our viewers to know today about you or your culture, your experience, or anything?
Other than just encouraging everyone to try to keep on building those connections throughout the pandemic, find creative ways if you run into someone at the supermarket, like another mask person, and person with a mask on, I don't know. And, I just always encourage people. I feel like you run to, to a bunch of interesting folks from all around the world. And I know it's harder right now to make meaningful connections, but I always like to ask people, oh, what's your heritage? Like, where are you from? And then you might discover that there's some similarities, or it's just very interesting to meet new people. Like here, I'm in a very small town in Florida, and um, a lot of a lot of people are from around here, but every once in a while you'll run into someone and they have a funny accent, or they just, they look a little out of place. So by talking to them, like even if they've been here for years, you may make them feel even more welcomed, and you just have that bond with each other. And definitely plan your next Germany trip for when the pandemic is eventually over.